Preparation for death strikes most people as morbid, strange, or even offensive. In the modern world, death is the great unspoken. People are encouraged to pursue life, accumulate wealth, build careers, raise families, and seek pleasure, but no one speaks seriously about preparing for the moment when all of that comes to an end. Yet the greatest teachers in human history, from every tradition and culture, have placed the preparation for death at the very center of spiritual life. Why? Because how we die determines where we go next, and where we go next determines everything. The Bhagavad Gita, spoken by Krishna on the battlefield of Kurukshetra, opens with this very subject. Arjuna is overwhelmed, grief-stricken, confused. He sees before him the prospect of death, his own and the deaths of those he loves. And Krishna does not comfort him with sentiment or distraction. Krishna corrects his understanding. He says in the second chapter, verse 20, "For the soul there is never birth nor death at any time. It has not come into being, does not come into being, and will not come into being. It is unborn, eternal, ever-existing, and primeval. It is not slain when the body is slain." This is the beginning of all preparation for death. One must first understand what dies and what does not. The body dies. The soul does not. This is not poetry. This is the foundational metaphysical reality declared in the Vedic literatures and confirmed by the greatest acharyas in the Vaishnava tradition. Srila Prabhupada, the founder Acharya of the International Society for Krishna Consciousness, spent his entire life teaching this point with extraordinary clarity. He wrote in his purport to Bhagavad Gita 2.13, "As a person puts on new garments, giving up old ones, the soul similarly accepts new material bodies, giving up the old and useless ones." Death, properly understood, is not destruction. It is a transition. The soul moves from one body to another, carrying with it the subtle impressions of its desires, thoughts, and consciousness. This is where preparation becomes urgently relevant. The Bhagavad Gita states in the 8th chapter, verse 6, "Whatever state of being one remembers when he quits his body, that state he will attain without fail." This is one of the most important verses in all of spiritual literature. At the moment of death, whatever fills the consciousness of the departing soul becomes the seed of the next life. If one thinks of wealth, one moves toward a life dominated by greed. If one thinks of family and attachment, one moves toward further entanglement in material existence. If one thinks of God, one moves toward God. Srila Prabhupada explained that this is not arbitrary. The entire mechanism of material existence is designed around consciousness. We become what we think, not just in this life but across lifetimes. This is why the great sage Sukadeva Goswami, speaking to the dying King Parikshit in the Srimad Bhagavatam, did not waste a single moment on matters unrelated to liberation. Parikshit had 7 days to live. He had been cursed to die by the bite of a serpent. Rather than spending those 7 days in lamentation or frantic arrangement, he sat on the banks of the Ganges, renounced all food and water, and listened to the Bhagavatam from Sukadeva Goswami. The entire 12 cantos of the Srimad Bhagavatam represent the essence of what a soul needs to hear before departing this world. The very first verse of the Bhagavatam declares that it is spoken so that the supreme benefit may be achieved, particularly by those who are about to die. It says in Srimad Bhagavatam 1.1.2 that this literature is the mature fruit of the tree of Vedic literature, and is meant for the liberation of the soul. But here is what most people misunderstand. Preparation for death is not something done on a deathbed. By the time one is dying, the mind is consumed by pain, fear, confusion, and the overwhelming weight of attachment. The body is failing. The senses are withdrawing. The capacity for clear thought is severely diminished. One cannot suddenly, in that desperate final moment, redirect a lifetime of material conditioning and achieve God consciousness. It is theoretically possible, as the case of Ajamila demonstrates in the 6th canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam. Ajamila was a thoroughly fallen man who, at the moment of death, called out the name of his son Narayana. Because that name is identical with the name of God, he was saved. But Ajamila's case is presented as extraordinary, as a demonstration of the inconceivable power of the holy name, not as a standard method to be relied upon. The standard method, the reliable path, is the one Krishna describes throughout the Bhagavad Gita. It is the path of constant practice. Abhyasa Yoga. One trains the mind, day after day, year after year, to rest in the consciousness of Krishna. The 8th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, verses 5 through 8, contains Krishna's direct instruction on this point. He says that one who, at the time of death, remembers him alone and quits the body will come to him without any doubt. But then he immediately adds that this remembrance must be cultivated through practice. Therefore, Arjuna, you should always think of me in the form of Krishna and at the same time carry out your prescribed duty of fighting. With your activities dedicated to me and your mind and intelligence fixed on me, you will attain me without doubt. The practice he prescribes is not merely intellectual. It is devotional. It is the chanting of the holy names. It is hearing the scriptures. It is associating with devotees. It is offering everything one does to God. This is the process of Bhakti Yoga, and it is specifically designed to purify consciousness so deeply and so thoroughly that at the moment of death, the natural outpouring of the mind is toward Krishna. Srila Prabhupada compared this to the example of a mango. A green mango cannot be made ripe in a single day by applying heat. It ripens naturally over time through the proper process. Consciousness is the same. It is ripened through sustained devotional practice. The story of King Bharat in the fifth canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam is among the most sobering illustrations of this truth in all of scripture. Bharat was a great king, a highly advanced devotee, who renounced his kingdom and went to the forest for meditation. He achieved a profound level of spiritual advancement. But near the end of his life, he became attached to a young deer that he had rescued and cared for. His mind, at the moment of death, was absorbed in the welfare of that deer. As a result, in his next life he was born as a deer. He retained some memory of his previous life, which caused him great lamentation, but the law of consciousness had operated with perfect precision. He thought of a deer. He became a deer. This story is not meant to frighten. It is meant to illuminate. The soul is always moving somewhere. It does not simply stop. And the direction of that movement is determined by what the consciousness clings to. This is the Vedic understanding of karma and rebirth, and it is not speculative. It is the systematic, rational account of why the soul cycles through repeated births and deaths in material existence, and what must be done to break that cycle. The Chaitanya Charitamrita, in the teachings of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, brings this entire subject to its highest expression. Sri Chaitanya taught that the chanting of the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra, Hare Krishna 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 Hare Rama 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 Hare, is the supreme method for the sage of Kali. In Adi Leela, chapter 7, he explains that the holy name cleanses the mirror of the heart. It removes the accumulated dust of material desire, false ego, and sensory attachment that has built up over countless lifetimes. When the heart is clean, when the mirror reflects clearly, then at the moment of death what arises naturally is love of God. Not fear, not grasping, love. This is the goal of preparation for death. Not merely to achieve a favorable rebirth. Not merely to escape suffering. But to return to one's original constitutional position as a loving servant of God. The Bhagavad Gita's 8th chapter concludes with Krishna stating, in verse 16, from the highest planet in the material world down to the lowest, all are places of misery wherein repeated birth and death take place. But one who attains to my abode, O son of Kunti, never takes birth again. Preparation for death, rightly understood, is preparation for liberation. It is the most important work a human being can undertake in this life. Srila Prabhupada returned to this theme again and again throughout his teachings. He would say that the human form of life is rare and precious not because it offers greater comfort or pleasure, but because it offers the capacity for self-inquiry. An animal cannot ask, who am I? Why am I here? What happens when I die? A human being can. And that capacity carries with it a corresponding responsibility. To waste the human life in mere sense gratification, in accumulating things that death will take away, is described in the Srimad Bhagavatam as the greatest misfortune. So what does preparation for death look like in practical terms? It begins with chanting. The Hare Krishna Maha Mantra is not a ritual formula. It is a direct call to God. Each repetition is an act of remembrance. Each repetition builds the habit of the mind to turn toward Krishna. It begins with hearing. Reading the Bhagavad Gita and the Srimad Bhagavatam is not academic study. It is medicine for the soul. It reshapes the inner landscape of the mind. It begins with association. The company one keeps determines the direction of one's thoughts. Devotees who are seriously engaged in bhakti practice provide an environment in which Krishna consciousness becomes natural and reinforced. And it extends into every area of life. How one eats, how one speaks, how one works, how one relates to others, all of these become part of the practice when they are offered to Krishna. This is the meaning of Karma Yoga as described in the 3rd chapter of the Bhagavad Gita. Every action becomes purifying when it is performed as an offering to God. The entire life becomes a preparation for that final moment. Death is not the enemy. Ignorance of what death means is the enemy. The soul that departs this world in full Krishna consciousness does not lose anything. It gains everything. It enters into the eternal, blissful, knowledge-filled existence in the association of God, which the Vedic literatures describe with great specificity and joy. That destination is available to every soul. It is not reserved for the scholarly or the wealthy or the powerful. It is available to anyone who sincerely takes up the process of bhakti yoga. The invitation is open. The path is clear. And every day that one engages in sincere devotional practice, every round of japa, every verse read, every act of service offered to Krishna, is a step in the only preparation that truly matters. Hare Krishna.